Hello YouTube, I'm Toby. Now, a while ago I bought what can best be described as a mystery PC from some guy in a small town close to where I live. He didn't offer much information on this PC. At first I thought he just wasn't aware of the components, but I now have a feeling that he knew exactly what was in this system. I bought the system for 250 Danish crowns, which is somewhere around 40 to 50 US dollars. It did seem like a good deal at the time. My first impression of the system wasn't really that good though. The side panel is missing, the system is dirty, and the remaining sides are scratched to hell and back. Furthermore, the cable management is practically non-existent. If we take a look around the CPU socket, we see that this is an ASUS motherboard with a dirty exhaust fan and 2 sticks of RAM that seems to be running in dual channel mode. Now I know that the exhaust may not be that interesting, but as we can see here, it's very dirty and the screws are not screwed in all the way. The CPU heatsink is very big and beefy, so naturally I assumed that there was something awesome and powerful under there. Boy was I wrong. The CPU under the heatsink is just an Intel Pentium 4 with just 1 core and 2 threads, I believe. Well, you can imagine my disappointment. I figured this out. Moving on to the GPU, we have an NVIDIA GT 7900. I don't know much about it, and you'll learn later why I really don't care about this particular GPU. Looking at the bottom right of the case, we find the hard drive. It's a 250GB 7200 RPM SATA drive, so I finally thought I'd gotten something useful in the system. Once again, I was wrong, but we'll get into that later. Last thing to look at before we turn the system on is the RAM. I wasn't expecting much at this point, so I was not disappointed to find just 2 1GB DDR2 RAM sticks. Now, time to turn the system on. At first the system seemed to work, but that annoying tone told me that something was very wrong. I later disconnected the speaker and repeatedly tried to boot the system. Much troubleshooting later, I found that one of the RAM sticks was not working. This means that I'm now down to 1GB of total system memory. I also took out the GT 7900 and replaced it with an Radeon HD 5570 just in case. Now the system worked. I went into the BIOS to take a quick look at the system specs. Once I was done, I tried to boot the system, but there was no operating system on the disk, although the guy told me that there should be a Linux on this disk. Frustrated with the whole thing, I set up a new system with an AMD Sempron and installed the Windows 10 on the hard disk. When I put the system back together again, I went into my box of spare parts and found 3 sticks of 512MB DDR2 RAM sticks. I also reinstalled the GT 7900 in the system. Finally, the system booted on its own, but there was a new problem. The GT 7900 must not be working right since there are some weird dots on the screen. I figured this wasn't too big of an issue and decided to continue the testing. However, upon installing the drivers for the GPU, the system crashed. At this point I figured that I did not wish to continue with the GT 7900, and I actually switched it out with the GT 9600 that I know works. Luckily the dots disappeared and the drivers were installed successfully. And now, after many frustrations and disappointment, it's finally time to benchmark the system. First benchmark is the user benchmark. This is a website that runs a complete system benchmark and compares it to other identical systems. The gaming score I got was just 11%, which is obviously pretty bad. The desktop score I got was 14%, so it's generally a bad computer. Last but not least, we have the workstation benchmark. Are you ready for this? 11%, not good. This benchmark also tells you how your components are performing. Generally, the component seems to be performing at or above expectations, well, all except for the hard drive, which seems to be performing way below expectations. Moving on to the second benchmark, Cinebench R15. I don't have much to say here. It's taken quite a while, and we finally ended with a score of just 35 Cinebench points, which is, well, very low. Now I did also run the OpenGL bench and got 13.7 frames per second. Third benchmark is the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool. All the settings were set to low. I honestly thought it would stutter like crazy, but it actually seems to run somewhat okay. The final score was 1646, which is low, but well, it's actually beyond my expectations for this system. Fourth benchmark I decided to run was the Furmark Preset 720p. There's not much to say here. The result was 584, so yeah. Finally, I wanted to test out the Counter-Strike Global Offensive benchmarking map. During installation, the game told me that the hard drive was damaged and it pretty much refused to continue the installation. However, after arguing with the hard drive for a while, I managed to force it to install the Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and I promptly fired it up. I set all the settings to low and fired up the benchmarking map. Now, as you can probably tell, this is a horrible experience. The game is unplayable to say the least. The frame rates are almost, well, they're just too low. You can't really use this system for, well, anything. Now, my final thoughts on this system. I have to say I'm disappointed with what I got, but you know the risk you run when you buy mystery hardware online. My plan now is to gradually try and upgrade the system and see what I can get out of it. I'm not going to spend much money on it since I doubt it has a very good resale value anyways. Now, after I'd done testing, the hard drive pretty much just broke. Started clicking and suddenly it just wouldn't boot and Windows wouldn't repair itself. So yeah, hard disk is definitely dead. So tell me guys, did I get screwed or did I get what I paid for? I really hope you enjoyed this video and thank you very much for watching.